Hey everyone, it's Deja from CrochetEverAfter.com. Today we are making this waffle weave baby blanket. I'm going to show you how to do the waffle weave stitch because this is just a basic, gigantic, rectangle, square size baby blanket. So it's just having this stitch pattern worked over and over, but I'll give you the pattern so that if you want to make the baby blanket you can. Or I'll also tell you how you can adjust the size for this. Super simple. The yarn that I'm using is a little bit thicker than this yarn. This is a baby sport weight yarn. The yarn I'm using is more worsted, so you'll see kind of a difference in the texture. If you're going to use a worsted weight yarn, go up in hook size. So you'll see that this yarn that I have here, I used a 6mm USJ hook. You'll see the difference in the texture. This is very drapey, very soft. I'm using large hooks, larger than I normally would for this yarn because of the way this stitch is made. We want lots of loops and we want it to be drapey and not super dense. Either way, it's very lofty. It's kind of a double thickness, which you'll see when we work it, how it becomes double thickness. So it's super warm. This is a great blanket, not just for a baby, but for anybody. So you can definitely make this for any size, any person, any color. I'm going to show you how to do the edging and how to get gauge and all that good stuff. So go ahead and grab your yarn if you're going to use worsted. I would probably recommend like a K or an L hook. So kind of experiment with either of those to see how you like the drape and thickness of the project. Otherwise, use the sport weight with the J and we'll get started. Alright, to get started with your blanket, you're just going to put a slip knot on your hook. So the easiest way I like to explain it is to hold both ends with the tail facing down, just flip it over, reach through that hole and grab the working yarn or the yarn attached to your ball, and then pull on your tail to close it up. And that'll give you a sliding slip knot. Then grab your working yarn to close it down. And for the actual baby blanket pattern, you're going to chain 101 chains because you're going to make the whole width of it. I'm going to do just 15 chains here to keep it small so that you can see how to work the rows. But what you can do is if you want to make this blanket even bigger, just keep chaining. So you can kind of get an estimate of what your chains are. It shouldn't shrink too much in the width ways. Or make a swatch first and then calculate how many chains you're going to need to make the inches of how wide you want your project. So if you're making it for like a queen size bed and you need, I don't even know how big a queen size bed is, 72 inches maybe, and you get 4 stitches per inch, then you're going to want to times 72 times 4 and make that many chains. So use a stitch marker if you're going to do that. So, well, it doesn't really matter if you're off a few chains because it's not specific to the actual amount of chains to make the waffle weave, so don't worry if it's not exact. Just make as close as you can get without having to, you know, really take the time to count every single one of them to make sure you have the perfect amount. But once you get to 101 or whatever stitches you need, we're just going to stop. I don't even know if I have 15 here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's close, 14. So 15. So once you get to the 100 stitches, 101 stitches, or whatever stitches you're going to do, however wide you want this, you can even start as a washcloth and see if you like the stitch first. But once you finish, you're going to start row 1, which is really simple. You're just going to turn, skip that first chain, and then you're going to single crochet in every chain after that. So stick with just this back loop because you're going to use the other loop, or you're going to use one of the other loops. Try not to go through 2 loops when you're doing this. Just grab this back loop because once we turn and we start working our waffle weave, we're going to need one of these other loops down here that we did not work into. So single crochet back across, and then we'll actually start the waffle weave on row 2. Alright, I finished my first row, and now we're ready for the actual waffle weave. So what's really important here is to know what your loops look like. So remember, we worked into the back loop only when we were making our foundation chain. So, use this as a holder here. This is a sharp scarf, a shawl pin. I don't even know where I was going with scarf, maybe scarf and shawl together. A shawl pin that I'll be giving away, one that's in a package, of course. On my website, I'll probably post that tomorrow, so look for that. You can comment to win this. It's very cute and handy, but I'm going to use it for showing my loops. So we worked into the back loop. What's left in front is this front loop. So we have these coming down all around. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick the pin through that front loop. So when I flip this, you can see what's going on. So if you have a stitch marker or a pin or anything, this is a good way. I'll actually put it over here so that you can see the very first stitch. So we're going to put it through that very first loop, flip this around, because what we're going to be doing is working into our back loop. So you can see the pin is coming out right here. This would also be if I go one over, because usually that first stitch is kind of small and a little difficult to see. So if I put in the second stitch, it might be a little easier. So here is the front loop down here. The back loop is right above it. So this, or the bottom bump, sorry, not the back loop. The bottom bump is right above it, and that's what we're going to be creating our waffle stitch in. You can also look at the back side of your single crochet. Kind of looks like two legs with a mushroom top. So the legs are sitting like this, and they're sitting right on top of your bottom bump. So this is what we need to recognize so that we can work into them to create the waffle. So we have, here's our very first one right here. Let me pull this out and show you how to do this. All right, so now we are going to insert our hook into this bottom bump, but we're also going to insert it into the front loop of our stitches. So this is another loop that you need to recognize. So if you're just looking at this, it's that one right on top facing you. If you want to get more down and dirty, look sideways. You'll see your V's that are the tops of your stitches. It's going to be the one on the right, this one over here, that we're going to go into also. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go from the bottom up. So I'm coming down here to this bottom bump, going in from the bottom to the top. Then I'm going to go all the way straight up through that front loop of my stitch. So if I turn sideways, you can see that I'm right in between the V. So this is going to create that waffle weave texture. I'm going to yarn over, so I kind of just lay my hook or my yarn over my hook, turn my hook facing that way is kind of the easiest way to get through these stitches, because whenever you have a V, if you go towards the center of that V, it's the easiest to get through. So point your hook towards your next stitch, pull through that front loop and your bottom bump, bring it up to the top of your stitch, because you could go ahead and single crochet right there, but you're going to have a really scrunched tiny stitch. So pull it up so it's sitting on top of your work, yarn over and pull through. Again, we look at our bottom bump down here. So if you need to, put some stitch markers in those front loops, because those are kind of easy to see from the front here. If you need help finding that bottom bump, insert your hook from the bottom up, then go straight up to the loop right on from row 1, pull through both, pull it up, and pull through. So you see now why we're using kind of a bigger hook for the yarn, because if this was like an H hook or a 5mm, my stitches would be really tight and they would be a lot more difficult to get my hook through. But using a larger hook gives you more room so that you can get through these nice and easy. There's that bottom bump again. That foundation chain can be a little bit difficult to get through, but I like it to be a little bit more tighter than looser so that it looks a little bit better. So if you don't want to put in edging, you don't have to, but if you want the edging, everything kind of works nicely. So you're going to do this all the way across your 100 stitches, because we skipped that first chain, so you should have 100 stitches now, or whatever size you're going to make this. And then we'll go for row 3 so you can see how you're going to work that, because you don't have a foundation chain, or a foundation chain to work into anymore. So I'll show you how to do that right after we finish this row. The end of my first row, or second row technically, but kind of the first row of waffle weave, and I wanted to make sure that you guys know how to work into this last stitch because it looks strange, and it's because of that turning chain. So you're just working into the last stitch that actually looks like a stitch. So if you turn your hook sideways, you have the one that you worked in right here, and then you have this last one here. So notice that there's the top of your stitch almost looks like it wasn't worked into, the second to last one, but you can see that one piece of yarn going across, so don't mistake that as a stitch. So we have over here is our turning chain, so it's kind of just like a little nub, so we ignore the nub and just work into that last stitch. Then we'll be ready for row 3. So we created, this is 2 rows, but it almost looks like just 1 row because of how we worked that stitch, where it came from below and through the first row. It didn't create a whole lot of height, so you can see that this could take quite a while. So if you want to just try it out on a washcloth first to make sure you like doing this stitch, but it's a great kind of mindless stitch where you can just keep watching some TV. So now we are ready for row 3. Alright, so for row 3, when we turn, we kind of see the same stuff that we just did, where we have the lines across the bottom and your front loop on top. And that's basically what you're going to be working into, but just so you understand the mechanics of it, what that line is, remember this down here was where we worked into the foundation chain, and then we came up and we worked through the front loop of the single crochet. So if I turn it, what you're seeing here is the back loop of that single crochet. So you can see how it's been worked into down here. So what you see is the rest of the row 1 loops that we're now working into with our row 2 front loops. So we're kind of working into both loops, but at different rows. So each row is going to have the current front loop of the front loop of the row you just made, and the back loop of the row before that. So hopefully that makes some sense. Otherwise, just look straight at your project and look for the 2 most visible loops that you have. So again, I chain 1, then I go up through there, through that back loop, or just the loop that you see at the bottom, and then through the front loop up at the top, yarn over, pull through both, pull it up, and pull through. So you can see it's pulling it up, starting to see the texture of the waffle weave. So these get a lot easier to work into as you go. That foundation chain is usually the hardest to do. And then as I work that, so you can start to see those little holes of the waffle, when I turn it over, you can see I have that back loop that I didn't work into, and that's going to be the next one that we're going to use, because now we have 2, but we want to use the closest. So I'll finish this row, and then we'll do row 4 together also, so you can see where you're putting your hook. Okay, last stitch of the row. It's a little crunched and funky looking, but we still have those 2 lines, so make sure that you're doing that last stitch. It's kind of difficult to count 100 stitches to make sure that you've got them all after every single row, but you can see that they should line up pretty well. You should have just kind of a little nub here from the turning chain, and then you've worked into that stitch. So usually at the beginning of the row or the end of row is where you end up losing stitches if you're brand new. So you just want to kind of watch those 2 places if you don't want to actually sit there and count. And also, if you need to count your stitches, you can either count the back sides, kind of easier than the front side, or just count the tops, count the V's. So if you want to make sure that you have 100 for sure, you can count each time, but just making sure you work into that last stitch should help you. So now you can see that we have 2 line dashes, but you're only going to work under the closest dash to you. So I say dashes because they look like little dashes coming across. So we don't touch the bottom row now because that one is complete. We have our little holes for it in the front, our little waffle weave, and now we're working the waffle weave into the next one. So again, chain 1, come up. So make sure that you're going into the right stitch so you can see you have this little thing right here. That's part of the turning chain. You want the big dash. That's right here. So make sure you go into the right dash so you don't create a stitch, because if you go into both of those, you're going to create a stitch. And then start doing your single crochets again. This is basically what we do for the entire pattern. Just create the same thing over and over. The baby blanket, I went for 200 rows. So if you like the size measurement that you see in the pattern, that's what you're going to want to go for, 200 rows. If you're making this for a special size, so like a queen size bed, you're going to want to measure the bed, and then you can just measure this as you go if you don't want to pay attention to your rows. It's probably easier than actually figuring out how many rows you need when you read gauge, which I'll just show you how to read gauge in a little bit once I get some more height to this. But that would probably be a lot easier because counting the rows on this might not be too fun. It's not super hard, but it's kind of like 2 rows for between each dash. But probably be a lot easier just to measure it. So you can do that for whatever size you want to make. So you can see on this side, we have our loop that we're going to be working into next. We have our waffle down here. Once we work into this loop, we're going to have another waffle right above it. Here we have our waffle forming. So we have kind of our first set of waffles on each side. And as we go, they are going to get more and more just like this. So you'll get those waffles. This is the right here. So you get this cool, holy effect going. It's really, it's actually quite soft. It doesn't feel so close, huh? It doesn't feel very stiff like you would think it would because of how doubled up it is, but it's very lofty and it catches a lot of air, so it keeps you really warm. So it'd be a really good blanket for anybody, not just a baby. So I'm going to go and do probably all the way to till this is about a square, and then I'm going to show you how to do the gauge, and just in case you want the same exact size blanket, or you just keep going to the size that you want, and then we'll come back and do the edging. So the edging is really simple, but I'll show you just in case you need it. Alright, I'm going to show you how to get gauge or check gauge on your blanket. So I'm using the actual baby blanket because the yarn is a smaller yarn. It's a sport weight as opposed to the worsted weight that I use for the sample. So it's this is going to be closer. This is going to be what the gauge on your pattern is. So if you're doing the baby blanket, that's the gauge that you want to get if you want the exact same size. Otherwise, just go ahead and do it and you'll get close enough with using the hook that's recommended. But if you are a stickler for the exact same size, this is how you're going to check it. So what you do is you take your gauge checker or a measuring tape, whatever you have on hand. I like the Susan Bates knit check because it's metal, so it doesn't bend, and it has the little window cut out for my gauge. So I'm looking at these V's. These little guys here are all of the single crochets. So what I want to do, you can see kind of this line coming down on each one. Just line up right against that. So line it up, make sure your project is laying flat and loose, and then count those little V's. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a half. So you can see just half of that V sticking out there. So I have 7.5 stitches for 2 inches. So that'd be 15 stitches for 4 inches. And then I'm going to work my way up. So each of these, this V between this V, between the 2 V's is 2 rows, because remember we did that waffle stitch that kind of scrunched them down. It took part of a row before and a part of a row, even the one before the before. So it's using up a lot of space. So each one of these little V's is going to count as 2 rows. So I can say I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and then I have kind of a half right here. So I have, let's see if I can get right on there. So I'm saying 2 because I have this V and then I have this space before the next V. So that's counting as 2. Then this V in space is 4, this V in space is 6, 8, 10, 12. Then I have kind of like that V right there. It's not quite a total V. It's a little bit off, but I'm going to go for 13. I'm going to say 13 is close because this isn't detrimental to get the exact gauge. It's not going to mess up the fit because you don't wear it. So I'm going to put 13 for the gauge. But now you know how to actually count it, what it means. So let's get back to the project, and I'm going to show you how to do the final row so you don't have the weird line that you're probably going like, how am I supposed to get rid of this line at the end? So let me show you that now. Okay, so I finished this last row. I'm pretty close to a square. I just kind of wanted to make a square. I'm folding it at the corner. You can see I have a little bit left, so that probably this next row should cover that. And you've probably been working and going, what am I going to do with this? If I'm not working in, every time I make a row, I'm going to have this on the other side. So now we're going to do the finishing row. So this is going to be the last row of your project before the edging, so that you can get rid of this line to make, or you won't create the line on this side when you're making this final row. So just like normal, we're going to chain 1. Did I already chain 1 here? Nope, I did not. Oops, I'm about to lose it. Come back. There we go. Okay, so we're in chain 1. Then we're going to start everything like normal. We're going to go through that loop, but instead of catching just the front loop this time, we're going to catch both loops. So I'm going to go under both loops at the top. And what that does, because if I went under just the front loop, we would create that back loop bridge again. But if I go under both, I have no ridge. So make sure this is the last row that you do, because you won't have anything to create the waffle stitch in after this. So again, bottom, then go through the front and the back, pull up, and single crochet. Do a couple of these and I'll show you the back side. So you're probably a pro at getting through that front loop now. So this will be a little bit difficult to do till you get used to it. All right, that's pretty good. So now when I turn it over, I have no ridge. So it looks slightly different because it doesn't have the totally defined square of the waffle weave, but because it's only one row and it's near the end, it should not show up too badly. You'll lose it, you know, the first time you go to use your blanket. So I'm going to finish this row, and then we are going to do the very easy edging for this blanket. I tried to keep it simple because this is a very kind of simple utilitarian stitch. So I kind of made the edging the same way. So let me show you how to do that in just a second. Finished the last edge and I fastened off. So if you look at it from the front, this would definitely be kind of the right side because you have the waffles all the way around. You can see this last row right there just is slightly different, but not like super different where you can really notice it. So if you want to pick like a wrong or right side, I would pick the side that you just finished and fastened off as the beginning for your edging. So we're going to grab our yarn and start that. So we're going to put a slip knot on our hook, same way. And then I'm gonna work right where I ended over here. So I'm gonna start right at this very last stitch. You can start wherever you want, it's totally personal preference, but I'm gonna do a standing single crochet, that way I don't have a slip knot on my hook. And I'm gonna do 3 in here. So when you see the pattern, it'll say SC evenly around entire blanket, and then SC 3 times in each corner to make turn. So what that means is when you get to the very last stitch that you're at, you're gonna put 3 single crochets in it. So I started here so you can see this right away. Put 3 single, get this tail in my way. 3 single crochets, and that's gonna create an automatic turn. Okay, I also want to start here so you can see the sides, because it's easy to work in the front and bottom because it has loops that are already predetermined for you to work into. When you get to the sides, it's not so simple. You have to kind of figure out where you want to put your hook so that your stitches are even and they look nice and you're not taking up too much of your side edge here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go for these little V's here. I'm going to see how much space this gives me when I single crochet into them. Because remember, this was kind of scrunched down, so it's not like I can fit 2 whole stitches in here. It's a little bit different size. So I'm going to go for each of these V's that I see that are laying sideways and see how that spaces out for me. Some more. So you see I'm skipping this thing right here and I'm going to this next V. Sometimes this will be too far apart, sometimes it'll be too close together, so kind of do 4 or 5 of them. Oops, I want to get right in the middle. I'm trying to be consistent here so it looks the same. So I try to pick something that looks the same that I can work into so that it looks nice. So you can see that I'm getting a good line. So what you do is you kind of lay it out, see if it's puckering like this when you're working it, then they have too many stitches. That's too many single crochets. If it's pulling apart like this and your blanket's real pulled apart, you have them spaced too far apart. But if you lay it flat and the stitches all kind of lay nice and flat, then you know you're pretty good. So I think that's a good spot for me to go. It's all kind of trial and error when you start working these side stitches. Is that the right one right there? There, here. So that one looks really far apart. So you can see I think I put that in the wrong spot there. I lost my rhythm. Let's see, we got that one. That should be correct there. Yep, that looks good. So you can see even I have problems with the sides. Take your time on the sides so that it looks nice, because if you want to do it really fast, it'll end up looking kind of strange and either stretched out or too many stitches. So take your time on the sides. The ends are very simple, but I'm going to go ahead and keep going around here so we can get to this corner. I'm going to kind of speed up just so we can get there. So these are going to be a little cockeyed. So when we get over here to this corner, again, we're going to do 3 stitches right into the corner. So you can either go right here or right in that very first loop. Either way, I'm going to go kind of like right in between so that I can get like a nice looking corner. There's no wrong or right way to do this. Well, the wrong way would be too many stitches or too less, but as in where you place your hook is up to you, what you like the look of. So if you wanted to go even like further, like all the way down here and create a really fat edge, you could. Totally up to you. This is that beginning foundation row, so it's a little strange looking. You can just go for this one loop that we actually didn't work into, which was the front loop. So we did not work into the front loop on the foundation chain, so you can just go into that if you want. Creates a little bit of a gap, but it should lay flat once you're done. So you can see when I'm pulling on it, it creates kind of a big hole, but as it lays flat, it's fine. So whatever you want. So the same thing, you're just gonna go all the way around. And then you're going to do the same thing for the round after. So you're going to join and then single crochet, so this will be a lot easier because you can just single crochet into the ones you went into. And then here at the corner, you're now, because you have 3 stitches in the corner, you're going to do 3 in that middle stitch. So we'll go around real quick and I'll show you. Okay, I'm just finishing up this round here. So I'm going to join with a slip stitch in the very first single crochet. If you joined your round with a slip stitch and then did the chain 1, still join it at the first single crochet, just makes it look nicer. Then for the next round, I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to single crochet in that same stitch. So this is the first of the 3 of the corner. So I am single crocheting in that very first stitch. Then I'm going to do 3 in the middle here, 3 to create another turn. Otherwise, we are not going to get around the corner. And then again, I just single crochet in all my single crochets. This is a lot easier to do because we can see them. So on this side, I tried to kind of get close to the edge. I wanted to show you the difference that I did here. Kind of close to the edge, so it kind of looked neat as best I could. This side, I went straight into the first waffle stitch that I came to. So I did 1 in every single waffle stitch, so you can kind of see the difference and maybe what you might like one better than the other, and use that for your edging. So you could either try going in the waffle stitch or go right along the edge, depending on what you like the look of. But you're going to go around again and do those 3 in each corner and join up, and then your blanket's going to be complete. Weave in your ends and you're set. So that is the waffle stitch. If you guys have any questions, leave them below, and thank you for watching.